Mrs. McGavin Weidlich is going to be joining us as well. And then our guest speaker of the evening is Fran McEwen from the Pennsylvania Higher Education Access Agency. I think I got that right. But she is our financial aid expert. We lean on her heavily for answering all of our questions, and we're so happy that she could be with us tonight. So I'm going to turn things over to Fran, and then at the end of the presentation, I'll highlight just a few things going on at Radnor in the financial aid world. Okay.
Hey, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay. So hello, everyone. I am Fran McEwen. I work for FIA. We have 13 access partners across the state, and I take care of Delaware County, Bucks County, and Montgomery County. There's my email address. So, if you have any questions later on, I'll put that up at the end also. Feel free to send me an email with your questions and I'll try to answer them. So the topics we'll cover tonight are financial aid made simple. We'll talk about scholarships, the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. We'll talk about both federal and Pennsylvania state aid. We'll discuss student and parent loans, both federal and private, financial aid notifications that your students will receive from their schools that they're applying to, and then I'll give you some web resources. So the first thing we always encourage families to do is look for the free money. So you want to exhaust all grants and scholarships so that, hopefully you'll have to take less loans out for the school of your choice. You want to definitely know what your deadlines are for your schools that students applying to, because every school will have their own financial aid deadline. So as the students looking and they're applying to different schools, they want to look on the website and say, when do I have to have my FAFSA filed by? You'll fill out the FAFSA, which isn't available yet. It should be available by December 1st. And then once your FAFSA is received at the school and the student's been accepted, the schools will send out financial aid offers. And that's when the students will start comparing the different offers to see what makes sense for the family and make sure they have enough money they need. So the federal government says that paying for your post-secondary education is the joint responsibility of the student and parent to the extent possible. And how they figure that out is they say, we have this person fill out a FAFSA, we determine if they have financial need, and then if they do, they'll get need-based aid. Not everybody qualifies for need-based aid. So, you're going through this process, but you may have need, you may not. However, there are merit-based scholarships, merit-based aid from schools available, as well as the need-based aid. There's different categories of financial aid. One we refer to as gift aid, and that would be grants and scholarships that don't have to be repaid. Self-help is if a student's working to help with themselves through school, or they may have savings that they're using towards their educational expenses. And then there's loans. There's federal loans, there's private loans, there's loans for students, and there's loan for parents. The different funding sources, where the money comes from, the federal government has both grants and loans. The state government has the Pennsylvania State Grant Program, and that's what we at FIA administer on behalf of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The schools that the student's applying to may have their own types of aid, and it could be need-based or it could be merit-based. And then there's scholarships available. So how do you apply for financial aid? I mentioned the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. That's the basic form that all schools will ask that you complete. FIA also asks that you complete this so we can determine if you're eligible for the Pennsylvania State Grant. And even some scholarship organizations that you may be applying to may have a need-based component, so they may be looking for the completion of the FAFSA. The FAFSA has to be completed every year. The first year you do the FAFSA, so as a freshman, you're also going to complete the state grant process, which consists of filling out a state grant form and a high school form through FIA. So that's only for first year students. Some schools will require additional forms. So they may ask that they may have their own institutional financial aid form, or they may have something called the CSS profile, which is put out by the College Board. So you can see on these schools' websites if they're requiring anything additional. And if they are, you definitely want to complete it because they're using that information to determine whether or not you're eligible for their institutional-based aid. If you don't have to complete it, that's fine. If you do, if they do ask for the CSS profile, is a cost associated with that. So the first school you send that to costs $25, and it's $16 for each school after that. Some students will qualify for a waiver of that fee, though. So this slide shows you what the FAFSA, when you go to studentaid.gov to complete the FAFSA, this is what the screen will look like that you're presented with to complete the FAFSA. Again, you have to do this each year, the student's applying for financial aid. We suggest you do it online, and mostly everybody does because it's faster, it's more secure. There's skip logic built into the online FAFSA, which means based on the way you answer certain questions, you may be able to skip other questions. And there's built-in edits. So hopefully those edits will help you not make mistakes on the FAFSA and it will be complete. You can do the FAFSA online in either English or Spanish. If you really want to file a paper FAFSA for some reason, you can go on the same website, studentaid.gov. There is a printable PDF version that you can print out and mail. Students don't have to be accepted for admission to a school to complete the FAFSA and list that school in the FAFSA. So they can just complete the FAFSA once it's open and list all the schools they're applying to. So as I said, every school is going to have a different deadline that they want the FAFSA completed by. In a normal year, the FAFSA is available October 1st. The FAFSA is delayed because last year, for when students were filing the FAFSA for the 24-25 year, which we're in right now, there was something called FAFSA simplification that took place. They made a lot of changes to the FAFSA process, and there were a lot of technical issues throughout the year. So this year they decided to delay the FAFSA again because what they're doing is they're doing some beta testing. So they're testing small groups of students completing the FAFSA. They're trying to see what problems still exist and trying to fix that before they open it in December. For the Pennsylvania State Grant, you have to complete, or most students have to complete the FAFSA by May 1st, 2025. There is an August 1st, 2025 deadline for students that are first-time students applying for Pennsylvania State Grant that are either attending a community college, a business trade or technical school, hospital school of nursing, an open admissions institution. We have a few of them in Pennsylvania, or a 2-year non-transferable degree program at a junior or 4-year college. So if you're a first-year student and you're attending one of those institutions, you have until August 1st to complete that FAFSA for state grant purposes. Now, the next year, when you're not a first-year student anymore, your deadline goes back to May 1st, because remember, you're filling out this FAFSA every year. So when the student gets into their section of the FAFSA, they'll be asked a series of questions to determine if they're dependent on their parents. So here's the questions. They're going to be asked if they were born prior to the year 2002. Are they married? Are they a veteran? Are they in the armed services? Are they working on a graduate level degree? Most high school students are going to say no to these questions, so they'd be considered dependent on their parents. However, some of the other questions, they may be able to say yes. They may be in legal guardianship. They may be an orphan, in foster care, ward of the court. They may have legal dependents that they provide more than one half support for. Or they may have been deemed homeless by a proper authority. So, as I said, some students, high school students, can say yes, so they will be considered independent of their parents. I will tell you that other than the 4 first bullets there, if they answer yes to any of the other questions, fee is definitely going to ask for some documentation to prove that situation, and some of the schools might as well. So for our purposes, we're going to assume the student is dependent, that they answered no to all of those questions on the previous slide. So if they are, who is the parent on the FAFSA? So if the parents are married, living together, both of their information is getting reported on the FAFSA. If the biological parents never married, but they are living together, both of their information gets listed on the FAFSA. If the parents are divorced or separated, and this is new as of 24-25, the parent that provided the most financial support to the student over the past 12 months is the parent that's going to contribute information to the FAFSA. Now, if the parents say, we provide 50-50, they have to use the parent that has the higher income and assets. So that's who they would invite to contribute information to the FAFSA. If that parent has remarried, so there's a step parent, that information is also reported on the FAFSA. If the student was adopted, it would be the adoptive parent's information. So if a student is in foster care, have legal guardians, or they live with anybody other than the parent, say maybe they live with a grandparent or an aunt or uncle, their information never gets listed on the FAFSA. So in order to help students, there is something behind the scenes in the FAFSA called the Parent Wizard, where they're trying to determine who is that parent contributor for the FAFSA. But this QR code, if you want to scan it, takes you to a link on studentaid.gov that will walk you through the Parent Wizard. So you can answer questions there, and it says, looks like this is the parent that will be contributing to the FAFSA. So this, I think, is really helpful, which is why we added the QR code to the slide. So when you're getting ready to complete the FAFSA, some information that you'll have to have at the ready, Social Security numbers for student and parents, any parents that's contributing information, email addresses of student and parent contributors, and the high school student shouldn't use their high school email address because they won't have access to that after a while. They should use their personal email address. For 25-26, so for anybody that's a senior on the call, we'll be looking at 2023 federal tax information. Required, and this is the parents, if you're required to list your assets, remember I said there's skip logic built into the online FAFSA. So sometimes based on the way you answer the questions, the needs analysis says it doesn't matter what their assets are, they're not going to make a difference, so they don't require that you submit that information. But if you are required to submit it, the things they're looking for are any balances you have as of the day you fill out the FAFSA. If you have money in checking, savings, stocks, bonds, you might have CDs, you may have opened 529 for the student that you're completing the FAFSA. You may have a small business and you have a that you have value in, or a farm. So when you get to that section of the FAFSA, I always say it's a good idea to click the help button there, because that will say, here's all the things that are considered assets that you have to list, and here's the things you don't have to list. Okay. Where the slides are. There you go. Okay, so roles within the FAFSA, I mentioned contributors a couple times. That kind of took the place of student and parents. It's anybody contributing to the FAFSA. So every contributor will need that studentaid.gov account. Parents and student contributors log in separately. So what happens, what we find has been the most successful way to complete the FAFSA is have the students sit down and do their section first, invite the parent contributor or contributors, and then the student will log out and the parent will log in from that invitation and complete their section. So that kind of seems to work the best. For some reason last year, and maybe they'll fix things and this won't happen, but it seemed like when the parents started the FAFSA and then the student had to go in, it seemed to have some glitches. So the student has to decide, who are they inviting? Who's their contributor? So if their parents are married and they're filing a joint tax return with their current spouse, they only have to invite one parent, because that one parent's going to be able to pull their tax information out. If the married parent is filing a separate tax return from their spouse, they're going to have to invite both parents, because both parents are going to have to pull their taxes in. If the parents are unmarried, living together, but did not file taxes jointly, same thing. They're going to have to invite both parents and have them, complete their sections of the FAFSA. Everybody that's contributing to the FAFSA has to provide consent. That is new. And what that is the information from the IRS is going to get pulled automatically into the FAFSA. You're consenting to have that information sent on to all the schools that the student lists on the FAFSA via, because we'll be getting your information. And if you were having it sent to any scholarship agency, you have to consent to that. This IRS direct data exchange, just like the title says, it's a direct data exchange. It's not something you have to pull over. You log in and it's going to come over your tax return information. Now, sometimes it doesn't work. So I put a couple examples of there why it won't work. Say you were married in 2023 and filed a joint tax return. You're now separated or divorced. So you don't want that combined tax return to come into the FAFSA. So you'll have to manually enter your tax information. If you filed a Puerto Rican or foreign tax return, you can't pull those tax returns in, so you'll have to, again, manually enter the information. If you were a victim of identity theft, which involved your tax return, they won't let you use this direct data exchange and you'll have to manually enter the tax information. I mentioned that all contributors have to apply for a studentaid.gov account. This is the website, that's studentaid.gov, same website where you'll go to complete the FAFSA. You'll go on here to create that FSA ID or studentaid.gov account. So the student will do it and the parent, whoever's contributing, will do it separately. You have to do it at least 4 days prior to completing the FAFSA because your information that you supply has to be verified. So you can see they're asking for your social security number. They're going to verify that with the Social Security Administration. They're going to ask you for your email address, mobile phone. You'll answer some security questions. You'll enable the two-step verification and you'll create a username and password. And that username and password is your studentaid.gov account. It's acting as your legal signature when you get into the FAFSA. Some parents are able to create a studentaid.gov account without a social security number, but there were a lot of problems when people did that last year. They weren't able to complete the FAFSA. So the workaround so far until they get it fixed is, yes, you can create a studentaid.gov account without a social security number as a parent, but when you get into the FAFSA, you can't pull your tax information over. You're going to have to manually enter that information. So the student, in our case, has applied for their studentaid.gov account. They log into the FAFSA and they'll be presented with dependent or onboarding steps, which are a couple videos that you're welcome to look at. They tell you things like what is the FAFSA all about, what can you expect, what happens after you file the FAFSA. So you can watch those videos, they're short, or you can skip through. The student's identity will be verified. Student will provide consent, and then they'll fill out all the sections you see on the right. Personal circumstances, that's the section that asks you all the questions to determine if you're dependent on your parents. Some demographic information, financials, which would be if the student has any assets in their name, they'd list them there. Colleges, so the student can list up to 20 colleges, and I'll show you the screen where they put their colleges in. Then they invite their parent, sign it, and then they've completed their section of the FAFSA. So this is the screen where a student will invite the parent or parents in to complete their sections. So you can see that they can invite up to 2 parents. Remember, if they're married filing a joint tax return, they only invite 1 parent. If they're married and they're filing separate tax returns, they're going to invite both parents. In order to invite the parents, they have to know the parent's social security number, date of birth, email address, full name. So they have to know all that information. So I would say my suggestion would be, as the student's filling out their section, the parent should sit down with the student so they can give them that information to invite them into the FAFSA. Once the parents invited, they follow the link in the email so that they can get into the FAFSA. They'll log in with their studentaid.gov account. They'll get the same onboarding videos that the student did. Their identity will be verified. They'll provide consent, and then they fill out their sections of the FAFSA, which pretty much is some demographic information, some financial information, and they sign it and confirm. This is what the screen looks like, where the student will list the colleges that they want to receive the information. So just know that a student can list up to 20 schools. Each school that you list can only see that you listed their school. They don't know the other 19 schools that you listed if you listed 19. You can go in, or the student can go in at any time and add or delete schools. And if you're applying to any Pennsylvania schools, the first school that you list should be a Pennsylvania school, because we at FIA look at that school to determine your eligibility for Pennsylvania state grant. You can change that later on if you need to. Remember when I said some parents will be asked for assets, some don't have to? So the top of this slide kind of tells you what I already told you. Here's the type of things that they consider assets. But if you look at the bottom of the slide, it says not reported on the FAFSA as an asset. These are things you would not report on the FAFSA. You would not report the value of your primary home, the value of your qualified retirement accounts, the value of life insurance policies, personal property, 529 for any other family member. So there are things you do not list. This is what the page or the screen looks like where you're going to sign this, the form. Both the student will do this and then the parent will do it. You do have to scroll all the way down to get to that where you check the box and hit submit. I know they're trying to put that all on one page. I don't know if that'll happen for this year, but just remember when you get to this page, if you don't see that information down the bottom, scroll all the way down. So once the FAFSA is submitted, the parent is presented with an abbreviated confirmation page. Just kind of talks about tracking the student's FAFSA form and next steps. The student receives an email with the full detailed confirmation page. So now the FAFSA form is considered complete, it's submitted, and it's being processed. Now, as far as the Pennsylvania state grant process, you have submitted the FAFSA. Once FIA receives the results of the FAFSA, the student has to complete the state grant process. And what that consists of is FIA will send the student an email, we'll tell them to come out to our platform, activate their account, and they'll complete what's called a state grant form and a high school form. So they're the two forms they have to complete to be considered for Pennsylvania state grant. It only takes a few minutes to complete it. It's very easy. Once they complete it, they just click on this box that says view rights and responsibilities. They review the rights and responsibilities. They then check this box that we have, circled in green, that they've read the rights and responsibilities, and that acts as their electronic signature on the state grant form. So since we're using for 25-26, we're using 2023 tax information. So something could have changed. Maybe somebody lost a job, or somebody was married and now they're separated or divorced. We just have some examples on this slide of something that may have been the reason you have a reduction in income. So if anything like that happens, you still have to report the 2023 tax information on the FAFSA, but you have to, what you need to do is contact the schools that the student's applying to and FIA to say, here's my reduced information or income information, and then the schools can take a look at that and decide if they'll use that more recent income information to adjust to your financial aid. This is something new that was on the FAFSA for this year, student unusual circumstances. So if a student answered no to all those questions to determine if they were dependent, but they have an unusual circumstance where, they can't get parental information, and you can see some examples here of why the student might not be able to get their parent information. It's not just my parent doesn't want to provide it, it's they have an, unusual circumstance. So if anything like this applies to the student, they can check the box on the FAFSA. The school will then get in touch with the student and say, what's happening, give us some supporting documentation, and then we'll take a look at it and see if we'll make you independent. So after the FAFSA is filed, all the information will be shared with FIA and all the college choices that you listed on the FAFSA. The student will receive an email telling them that their FAFSA was processed, and they can go in and review their FAFSA submission summary, which is a summary of everything they put on the FAFSA. FIA then sends that email to the student telling them how to apply for Pennsylvania state grant. And students should always be monitoring their email account, because we at FIA might need additional information. The schools you apply to may need additional information. So you always want to be monitoring your email. And then when everything's complete, the school will send out the financial aid notifications to students. So I just want to tell you a little bit about what happens with that information that goes on the FAFSA. Schools are going to determine if you have financial need. So every school will have their own cost of attendance. They will then look at the student aid index, or we call it the SAI. That's the result of the FAFSA, the student aid index. So they're looking, what's the difference between the cost of attendance and student aid index to determine if that student has financial need. When they come up with the cost of attendance, these are the types of components they're using: tuition and fees, housing and food, books, course materials, transportation, and personal expenses. When they're determining that SAI, that student aid index, it's primarily coming from your income, so primarily income driven. But they are also looking at assets from both student and parent and the family size. When that SAI is determined, it's going to remain the same no matter what school the student attends. When they're looking at the parent income, they make certain allowances. So they make allowances for payroll taxes. They make an allowance for a two-parent working household, and they make a living allowance based on the family size. So the family size is really important. I just want to stop and mention something here. On the FAFSA for 24-25, and I'm assuming it'll be the same for 25-26, there is a question. They pull your family size over from the number of dependents that you list on the income tax return. So they'll say on the FAFSA, is your family size correct? But they don't tell you what the number is. So I would say check no so that you can see the number of the family size. And if it's correct, go back and check yes. If it's not correct, go in and correct it, because you can do it at that point. Because you want to make sure that's right, because they're basing this living allowance on the family size that's reported. For assets of the parent, they're using about 12% of the value of the assets that the parent has reported. They're making the same allowances if the student reports income, payroll taxes for that student. If the student had earnings from a work-study program, which is a federal program they may be offered as part of their package, those earnings are excluded. If the student has a job other than work-study, the income that is protected up to the first $11,510. So they're not going to take any of that into consideration. If the income's over that $11,510, they use 50% of that towards the SAI. And if the student has any assets in their own name, they're looking at 20% of those assets toward the SAI. So basically what the colleges are doing is they're saying, here's my COA, cost of attendance, minus my student aid index, which was determined by the FAFSA, minus any outside financial aid. You might have an outside scholarship, or maybe an employer or parents' employers giving some type of money towards tuition. They'll deduct that from the cost of attendance, and the difference is the need. And that need is what the school's working with to determine, how much financial aid you can get. Most schools can't meet 100% of need. They try to meet as much as they can of that need, but sometimes there's a gap. So when the school sends out that financial aid notification to the student, that's the official notification, which will list the types of aid the student's getting, the amounts, and what that student has to do if they want to accept or reject any aid. They'll also disclose some students' rights, responsibilities, and academic requirements. For example, a student has to be passing courses and keeping a certain grade point average in order to continue to receive financial aid. When you receive that package, some of the things you should be looking at is how much of that financial aid is free money, because you want to, as I said in the beginning, exhaust all the free types of financial aid first, grants and scholarships. Then hopefully this will lessen the amount of loans you have to take. You want to know which awards are based on need, because that could change from year to year. You're filling out that FAFSA every fall, and your financial need could be different. Maybe your family size changed, or somebody got a big promotion at work, so you have more income. So that could change the need-based aid. You want to know what types of aid are based on merit. And are there any conditions on that free merit money? For example, if a college says, we're going to give you this much per year for 4 years because you did really great in high school. However, you have to keep a certain grade point average while you're in college, or you lose that money. So you want to make sure you're aware of all those types of things. And, will the awards increase as tuition increases? Will the awards change from year to year? And will loans be needed? Because you want to see how much loan they're expecting you to take out and what you feel comfortable with. So federal and state aid, when you complete the FAFSA, you're automatically applying for the federal Pell Grant. So we have the maximum grant there. That's for 24-25. We don't know what it will be for 25-26 yet. That won't get decided till next spring sometime. But you'll get the same amount at every school you attend. So that is a need-based grant. The Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, that's another federal grant that the college will tell you if you're eligible for. and that is preference for this grant is given to students with the highest need and Pell eligible students. Federal work study, which I mentioned a little bit, a college will look to see if the student has financial need and may offer them the federal work study program. So that money does not come right off of the your tuition and fees. If it's on your aid package, just know that it's not going to be taken off the bill you owe. What happens is the students start school, they work with the financial aid office to get set up in a position, and they work and earn that money and get paid in a check. And that money is to be used towards educational expenses. So that's how the federal work study program works. For Pennsylvania state grant, again, we have the maximum up here for this year, 24-25. So that's a full-time award for a student. The most they could get is $5,750. And that would be a student who has the highest financial need and they're at one of the higher cost institutions in Pennsylvania. You can get this grant as a half-time student, and you would just cut the award in half. If the student wants to take this grant out of state, the only schools they can do that, or the only states they can take a Pennsylvania state grant to, are listed there. So it'd be Delaware, DC, Massachusetts, Ohio, Vermont, West Virginia. However, the most they could get if they take a Pennsylvania state grant to one of those states is $600. Unless they're a veteran, they could get $800. Now, when we determine Pennsylvania state grant eligibility, it's based on financial need, but also based on the cost of the school that you attend. So you can see there that that $5,750 maximum award is only going to be given to a student that's at one of the higher cost institutions in Pennsylvania, which usually are our 4-year private schools. The next rung up is the next cost tier. The max is $5,260. And they're the schools, the state-related system schools like Penn State, Pitt, Temple, and I think it's Lincoln. The rung up, the next cost tier is for the maximum is $4,894, and that would be for the PASHE schools. For instance, Shippensburg, Clarion, Westchester, those types of schools. And then finally, the lowest cost tier will be the community colleges. The federal student loans, unfortunately, most students need to take somewhat of a loan to attend college. The good news is every student, no matter what their financial need is, can get the federal direct student loan. What happens is the school looks at your financial need, sees if you have financial need, and if you do, you may get a subsidized federal loan. And that means that the federal government will pay the interest for you while in school and during the 6 months after you graduate. You have a grace period of 6 months once you graduate. If you get an unsubsidized loan, you don't show any financial need, the student's responsible to pay that interest. So the interest rate gets reset every July 1st. For this year, it's 6.53%. Hopefully, if interest rates go down, this will go down for next year, but that remains to be seen. The fee that gets taken off the top of the loan is 1.057%. The loan is in the student's name, so the student doesn't have to show any collateral or credit check, but they do have to sign a master promissory note promising to repay the loan. I'll show you a chart in a minute telling you how much a student can get each year, but just know that once the student graduates, there's a couple different flexible repayment options to choose from. So as a freshman, a student can get up to $5,500 under this loan program. If they're eligible for that subsidized loan, they can only receive up to $3,500 in the subsidized. The $2,000 difference would be an unsub. They may show no financial need and get the full $5,500 in unsub. For the second year, the student can get up to $6,500. Third year and beyond, they can get up to $7,500. And for their 4 years undergraduate, the most they can borrow is $31,000. Now, I'm not going to, the last column is if the student's in graduate school, so we won't go over that tonight. But if you look at that third column, I just wanted to point out that the amounts there are for independent students, or if the student's dependent and their parent applied for a federal plus loan, which I'll talk about on the next slide. If the parent applied for that and got turned down, the student can take an additional $4,000 in their own name, but it's unsubbed. So the Federal Direct Parent Plus loan is a loan that a parent would take out, but it's for their dependent undergraduate students' costs. So the parent can borrow up to the cost of attendance for that student minus any financial aid the student received. It's always going to stay in the parent's name. The parent can choose to have the principal deferred while the student's in school, but that interest will continue to accrue. Rates, just like the student loan, are set every July 1st, but these are higher than the student loan. This is 9.08%, and the fee is higher also, 4.228%. So there is a lenient credit check done to decide if parents are eligible for this. So they make sure that the parents don't have adverse credit, but they really don't look at your ability to repay. So you just want to be careful because they may say, yeah, you're eligible, but you'd never have the ability to repay this loan. It's high interest rate with high fees, so you want to be careful of the amount you might take out under this loan program. Of course, we always say loans are the last resort. You want to exhaust all other forms of aid. But there are private alternative loans that private lenders make available. Banks, credit unions, some states have these private alternative loans. They are in the student's name, but almost always require a cosigner, which most times winds up being the parent. The parent or the student can borrow up to the cost of attendance minus any financial aid they receive, but there's a full credit check done to determine eligibility for this loan. So they're looking at FICO scores, they're looking at debt to income ratio, all those types of things. Just like the PLUS loan, the principal can be deferred while the student's in school, but the interest continues to accrue. And you want to make sure you compare the different terms. They vary by lender, so you want to make sure you're reading the fine print. And you also want to compare it with the PLUS loan too, because I just have the screen to give you an idea of what these private loans are about. We at FIA have a private loan called PA Forward. So if you're interested in learning more about that, just go to fia.org/PA Forward. But for this year, there's our interest rate range. So if somebody has really good credit and they pick a certain repayment option, they might be able to get a lesser interest rate than the PLUS loan, and there's no upfront fees for this loan. So there are all the things you have to look at and compare. As far as scholarships are concerned, there's your post-secondary schools may offer scholarships. A lot of times they'll let you know when they send you your admissions letter that you're eligible for a scholarship. Sometimes there's an additional application. So you want to make sure if your school offers scholarships that you're doing everything you have to do to be considered for those scholarships. There's local and regional scholarships that I'm sure your Radnor's guidance office will make you aware of, and you may even know about some of them just from the community. And then there's national scholarships. So some tips that we like to share with you about the outside scholarships: start searching for them early. Definitely use free scholarship websites, and I'll give you some in a few minutes. Don't ignore the scholarships with the smaller award amounts. Well, number one, they're less competitive than the ones with the higher award amounts, and they can add up. If you get $400 or $500 scholarships, you have $2,000. Definitely don't miss the deadlines because you won't get a scholarship if you miss the deadline. And you can search every year for these scholarships. So if you don't get one as an incoming freshman, you can look for a scholarship the next year. Scholarships are based on all different types of criteria. So yes, it's nice to have a great GPA, but they're not all based on that. Some are, some aren't. They could be based on a student doing community service in high school, playing a certain sport. They belong to an activity or a club. They may have played an instrument. Their employer that they worked at through high school may give scholarships for college. So lots of different criteria for scholarships. So this is the slide that lists, and it's not exhaustive, but it lists scholarship websites that we're aware of that are legitimate and don't cost you money. So you can take a look at these or have a student take a look at these. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'll just point out the first one, FastWeb. Student goes in, creates a profile, which only takes a few minutes, and then they'll start receiving lots of emails about possible scholarships they may want to apply for. So as far as resources, because I know this is a lot of information to throw at you, our website, fia.org, has a lot of resources about financial aid. We also have something called Education Planner, which not only has information about financial aid, but it has information about other things for example, career interests. We have all kinds of information about different careers and what kind of education you need to be in a different career. What's the salary like? So a lot of good information about those types of things on education planning. My Smart Borrowing, that's a website we have where students can go in, put a school that they think they want to attend, how much the student and family have saved up towards the student's education, what the student wants to be after they graduate, what job they're looking for, and where they want to live. So then the tool will take them through saying it looks like you'll probably have to borrow this amount, and it'll tell them what amount they should stay under. They'll then say, when you graduate, you said you wanted to be, say, for example, an accountant. This is the starting salary for an accountant that said they wanted to stay in the Philadelphia area. Here's your monthly expenses, including that loan payment. And then it'll show them, do they have money left at the end of the month, or do they have to rethink something? So I think that's a pretty nice tool. Our toll-free number, FIA, is there. So if when the student's going through the state grant process, if they have any questions, they can call that number. The Federal Student Aid Information Center, that's the federal number that you sometimes have to call if you have an issue with that student aid account number you set up, or you have a question regarding the FAFSA. I know this year for the 24-25, it was really difficult to get through, and sometimes you got through and got hung up on. They, from what I understand, they're hiring a lot more people, so it should be better when you get to complete the FAFSA, and they're going to be doing a lot of training with these people. Studentaid.gov, that's the website where you're going to set up your studentaid.gov account and you're going to complete the FAFSA. That website also has a lot of information about all the federal programs that are out there, federal financial aid programs. This slide, if you want to scan this QR code, if you want to learn any more information from FIA, we send emails out. So if you want to be on that email list, scan this QR code and sign up. On the FIA website, as I said, we have a lot of good information and resources. There's a financial aid resource section, and there's information for students and parents, as well as high school guidance counselors. So what can you be doing now? I'm sure you're all visiting college websites as well as visiting their campuses. You can utilize colleges' net price calculators, and what that is every college is required by federal regulation to have a net price calculator on their website. And that's basically, it will say, here's our sticker price. You put in some information about your family situation, and it will say, this is probably what the net price will be for you. Now, there will be disclaimers saying this isn't an actual financial aid package, it's just trying to give you an estimate. But that helps when, say, the student's considering an expensive school and you're thinking, well, we're not even going to apply there. You might use this net price calculator and say, oh, well, maybe we could apply there based on what we think we might get. On the studentaid.gov website, there's also an estimator to figure out what your student aid index would be. Again, it's just an estimate because they don't ask for all the information the FAFSA does, but you can go on and take a look at that. You should be exploring scholarships. If there's seniors on the call, you and your parent contributor can set up your FSA ID or studentaid.gov account. Can't complete the FAFSA yet. You have to wait till December 1st to do that. And then, of course, talk about between parents and student what is affordable. FIA puts all kinds of information out on all the social media platforms, so I'm sure you'll see some reminders out about all different types of things from us. And again, there's my contact information, so and my email address. So if you think of any questions you have later on, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll try to help you. So that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if there were questions in the chat. I was trying not to look while I was presenting, but if there are.
So there was one question, and while we answer that one, if other parents or students, if you want to throw other questions in the chat, would there be any difficulties for families who might have already created a studentaid.gov account?
No, for a prior student, you mean, for an older sibling?
For an older sibling, or I think like just getting ahead of the game and starting one now.
No, you can, if in both cases, if the parents have that, it was an FSA ID. If they have that for an older sibling, that parent would still use that FSA ID. the student would have to create their own. But if you've already done it, that's fine. Just keep it somewhere safe so that when the FAFSA comes out, you'll know where it is and you'll know, what your username and password is. But that's fine if you create that now.
Yeah. So that was the only question so far. I'm going to give everyone just a little bit more time to put any questions in the chat while I point you towards some resources that we have available on our website. Oh, wait, here's one. I understand the CSS profile needs to be filled out for a few colleges, but since it comes with a cost, is it okay to fill out the FAFSA alone?
Not if the school requires it. If the school doesn't require it, you don't have to do it, the CSS profile. If they require it, they're using that to determine your eligibility for their institutional money, so you'd have to do it. There is a fee waiver. You'd have to be eligible for that. There's an income cutoff. So you can, look into that also.
Yeah, the fee waiver is sort of built into the questions of the CSS profile. So as you answer them, if you qualify for that fee waiver, it just won't prompt you to pay a fee at the end. One thing I do want to say, particularly for our families of seniors on the call tonight, is because of the delays that we saw with the FAFSA last year, more colleges are asking families to complete the CSS profile this year. And some of those colleges are public institutions that in the past have not asked for a profile. So I just want our seniors to be very mindful, especially as you might be submitting some early applications in this next week. What are the financial aid requirements at each of the institutions that you're applying to? And don't count if you had older siblings who only had to do the FAFSA, don't count on that being all you have to do. Look at each of your college's requirements and see if you might have to do that CSS profile for this year. So it says, one question, on average, how close are private colleges in fulfilling financial need as determined by their respective net calculator? That's a great question.
That's college by college. I couldn't give you an answer on that because the federal government has a basic template for the net price calculator that some schools use. Some schools have bought more savvy products, which are closer probably to what you'd really get. So you'd have to ask that question of the college. How close is this to what you wind up giving once you actually complete the financial aid forms?
Yeah. I will say many colleges have what's called a gap between what they see as your need and what they give you in terms of financial aid. There are colleges that advertise themselves as meeting 100% of need. So those would be colleges that do meet full need. But that's a set list of colleges that do that. Do we know when the FAFSA will be available in December? Is that December 1st date
They're
set?
saying by December 1st.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So hopefully that's a month earlier than last year. So, and I know they're doing the last beta test, I think, is mid-November. So I know they've done 2 already. They're doing one like November 4th to 7th, and I think there's another one the next week. So as they do these beta tests, they're trying to, observe what might be going wrong, hopefully fix the problem, so we won't have all the issues we had last year.
Okay, yeah. We had a couple questions about just sort of accessing this presentation and the slide deck. We will post both the recording of the presentation as well as Fran's slides to our website probably tomorrow. We're usually able to get those up pretty quickly. So sometime tomorrow we'll post them to our website, and then we can also put them on Schoology. I do just want to kind of point everyone's attention. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Fran, I don't know if I'm going to stop you from sharing so I can share my screen.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that everybody here knows that on Schoology, which our students are accessing on a daily basis, we have counseling department Schoology groups for each grade level of students. So I'm going to pull up the senior classes Schoology just for example here. And this is where we make a lot of announcements. And in the resources portion of Schoology under college planning resources, we have a wealth of both financial aid and scholarship resources available for students. Unfortunately, Schoology groups are only available to students. Parents who have Schoology access can't see that, but you could look over your student's shoulder if you wanted access to any of this. And I think we can probably post this recording and the slide deck into our Schoology resources as well for students. So there's kind of, if you click here, a lot of the links that Fran was mentioning in her presentation are also linked on here. So it's just kind of a one-stop shop that we keep as we find great resources. We just keep throwing them into these different folders so that all students have access to them. I'll stop sharing my screen. I did see a couple other questions. Will the kids who apply to Pennsylvania state schools not hear about admission acceptance until after the FAFSA is available and filled out?
No, they can apply for acceptance, and they could be very well be accepted before the student fills the FAFSA out. They just won't know what their financial aid is.
Right, right. And I did have a request for our website. I will just put the link to our website in the chat. I'm going to link the actual counseling department specific website because that's where we post recordings of events, upcoming events, and we do have some resources on there for parents as well. And yes, we will put a link to that in the Radner Reader. On the Radner Reader, we usually just link to the website, right to where you can click and find the recordings and things like that. Okay.
There isn't a question, but I'm not sure I know what they're asking. Can you please review the scenario about students who are using this to ensure compliance for being eligible for scholarship not related to needing financial aid? I'm not really sure what they're asking.
Oh, I see that too.
Yeah, I don't. If whoever put that in, if
So I do. So some colleges, in order for a student to receive merit-based aid, ask that the family still complete the FAFSA.
Okay.
I think that's what she's referring to.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I just didn't want their question to get missed, but I wasn't really sure how to answer it.
Yeah. So, in terms of that scenario, you would just have your FAFSA sent to that school. So you would still complete the FAFSA like Fran described and have it sent to those schools that need it. On the school's application, you can check no to not applying for need-based aid. So there is a difference between merit-based aid and need-based aid, and schools differentiate between the two. I hope that answered your question.
Yep. They said thank you.
Okay, good. So I don't think I missed any other questions. I know, other counselors are on here. If you see anything, please jump in. To summarize key takeaways, my senior should do her CSS and FAFSA once those are available to kickstart things, correct? So the CSS is only required by certain schools. At the beginning of this presentation, I did put a link in there to the schools that require the CSS. So only if your senior is applying to one of those schools should they do the CSS profile. That is available now. The CSS profile opened on October 1st. And so students and families can complete that today if they wanted. And so for our seniors who might be applying early action, if a school wants the CSS profile, they may want it with that early action application. So they might set a November deadline for the CSS profile only. To kickstart things for the FAFSA, the only thing that you can do right now is create that studentaid.gov account and get that verified by the government. On December 1st, hopefully, fingers crossed, the FAFSA will become available. And certainly we will push out some information to our senior families once that's there. I do want to advertise an event that we're having in December for seniors and their families. It's on December 5th. Fran will be helping us out again. We do a FAFSA completion event for seniors and families who just may want to be able to get some extra assistance as they complete the FAFSA or ask questions kind of as they're going through it. It'll be held at Radnor High School, and we will send out a sign up to senior families. We just want to make sure we have enough space to ensure privacy for everyone who attends. So we'll send out some information, how to prepare for that night and a sign up to come to that night as we get closer to December. So a couple little last minute questions. The Common App. So the Common App does not necessarily ask about merit-based aid. There was a question about that. No, so every college will have their own kind of process for merit-based aid. Some colleges automatically consider every prospective application for merit aid. Other colleges will have a separate application for some of their scholarships that are merit-based. So, seniors and even rising juniors, or not rising juniors, seniors and juniors, as you're doing your research on the colleges that you plan to apply to, it is worthwhile for you to take a look at what are the merit aid requirements at each school. Is there anything else or anything extra that you need to do? And so we will post the resources like the presentation tonight to Schoology in the group. That will not be accessible to parents. The way Schoology works, the groups are only accessible for our students. However, we'll post the same slide deck and presentation onto our website and put that link in the Radnor Reader. It'll come out not this Sunday in the Reader, but the following Sunday.
Sarah, if I can just share for our families as you're hearing a lot about the CSS profile, because it is live and active, as Sarah posted the link, College Board does a really nice job in providing some video tutorials. So I would encourage you just to go ahead and take a look at the website. You're going to be utilizing your student's College Board account because everything is kind of connected to that username and password. But there's a lot of helpful videos and tutorials and an itemized list of schools throughout the country that will require it. So that would be something that, the information is there at your disposal. And certainly you can reach out to your child's college and career counselor should you have any questions on how to identify if your school requires the CSS profile as well.
All right. I did just throw a link in the chat that takes you directly to like the kind of overall CSS profile website. And you can navigate to the tutorials, the list of all the institutions and everything from that link. Okay. All right. Fran, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, like I said, we lean on Fran as our financial aid expert. And so thank you so much for joining us tonight. And for seniors, we'll send out more information as the FAFSA goes live. You'll hear from us with a sign up for that FAFSA completion event as well. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
You too.